Hey guys, welcome everybody to the Commander-in-Chief podcast. I'm your host, Yuri Kruman, and I'm very excited today to have a conversation with my good friend Ariel Assaraf, the CEO of Coralogix. I'll let him do his own intro. One of the things that I want to discuss today above all others, I think, is more kind of the people side of the business. So Ariel, please feel free to do your intro.
Hi Yuri, great to be here. Ariel Assaraf, founder, CEO at Coralogix. What we do is stateful streaming analytics for logs, metrics, and security information, basically helping companies with scale as they want to monitor and observe their systems and their cloud infrastructure, fix, optimize, and protect.
Awesome. Can you give us, again, I think this might not be the most obvious kind of field. I think for a lot of people, this might be kind of a hidden treasure. Maybe if you could give us a sense of how you work with some of your clients and, what are you pulling and what are you making with it?
Yeah. So our space is mostly high growth internet and SaaS companies. So a good example would be Monday.com, where they collect all their information, their infrastructure, application data, security information, internal tooling into Coralogix. We automatically analyze the data, cluster it. They can forward the data to any destination that they like, manipulate the data, present, visualize the data, and get proactive insights from Coralogix. That helps them both reduce their mean time to detect and resolve production issues, optimize their R&D processes with our CI/CD, automatic benchmarks and pipeline observability, and protect their cloud environments with our audit and automatic security alerting capabilities. It's a tool that basically becomes a data platform of the organization, and all engineers, support teams, QA, solution engineering are using Coralogix to get basically a source of truth to how their systems are behaving in production.
So I'll try to translate that to myself because it's not always the most obvious thing. I know we've spoken actually at greater length about what you guys do, but I think my listeners might not be fully with what this is. So first of all companies these days generate massive amounts of data. And I think most companies, unless they're incredibly savvy and, with Coralogix for a while and making sense of what's going on, they don't really know what the hell do they have. They're sitting on this, this data, this database, this CRM, what is all this? What can I make? What can I get out of this? Right. So here I am, an HR guy, and I think HR people, no offense taken to any other HR people, but HR is also something that sits on a ton of data, and I would say maybe more sophisticated enterprises, maybe your Fortune 500 companies, they're, a little bit more savvy about collecting data, whether it's, performance metrics, whether it's recruiting data, talent acquisition pipeline, or, I don't know, the average tenure here, or, if you talk about Google, that's a whole other level, right? I mean, so basically all kinds of different parts of the company, again, if you're in finance and you're talking about business intelligence, that's a lot more advanced. You're talking about HR, you're starting to maybe think about, what do I do with this? How do I optimize this? How do I make decisions? Sound decisions based on data. We're catching up. But the bottom line is there has to be some way to pull the data. There has to be some way to store the data. Maybe you want to do that on a private server. Maybe you want to do that somewhere in the cloud. But you have to do something with it. So there has to be almost like a guide. There has to be someone who says, okay, here's what you have. Here's the map. And here's what you can do with that data. We can help you make sense of that. So I think that's super valuable. Again, it's not the most obvious thing. It's not sitting on the surface. I love the image of, sell the pickaxes. Don't go prospecting for gold.
Yeah.
That's how you get there. So I think there's a little bit of that going on here. Cool. One of the things I wanted to get into, you're a brilliant guy. I mean, you've done so many different things. Why choose this? Why is this what you chose to build, over the last few years?
I think I was actually not planning this route in my life, but since I enlisted the Army, I joined the 8200 unit to one of the departments that dealt with the largest amount of data inside the unit. And since I was 18, the entire challenge or all the challenges that I face were data challenges. How do I create a report? How do I detect anomalies? How do I analyze things that are abnormal inside the data? And then when I left the Army and I joined Variant Systems, which is the Homeland Security Division, it was very much the same. And we started handling nation-state size customers that had huge amounts of data. And I'm not even talking about their data. I'm talking about even how our systems operate. And we need to analyze that data to give them the performance. And obviously, everything's mission critical. And then there are a few areas where this was problematic. First of all, the speed, the cost, the level of proactiveness that you get, the ease of use. And this is why we started Coralogix back in 2015. We went through a complicated journey to get where we are today, and we had to reinvent ourselves a few times. But at the end of the day, I think what brought me to this is that this is probably one of the biggest challenges that the tech world is facing today. Everything is a data platform, or everything is a data problem. So whatever, you mentioned HR or business information or financial information or security information, or everything at its core is a data problem. So I can talk about security information and cyber and try to look at it from a standpoint of, I want to identify specific attacks. I want to let you know if someone is doing something abnormal or is breaking into your system, and I can describe it as just a list of rules, but it's actually a data platform or a data problem. Because to identify those set of rules, to identify something abnormal, to identify a signature that is suspected, I have to digest all your information, and I have to analyze all your information. I have to understand what is abnormal, or to pick up your own criteria as to what is abnormal. And then I have to notify you, but I also have to present it in a way that makes you understand what's your next step or lets you continue to investigate. So everything basically that we're seeing today in the world is data problems that companies are trying to solve. And when you look at, so we have this philosophy here, when you look at the power of software and what software have become specifically in the past couple of years, and I think COVID gave us a very strong lessons about the importance of technology. You just think about a lockdown 30 years ago. How terrible would that be? I mean, people would have starved. People would have not known what to do with their lives, how to spend their day, how to educate themselves, how to treat themselves, medically, how to protect their countries if you don't have satellites or anything, and everything would have been much more complex. I'm not even talking about inventing vaccinations and stuff, but the simple things. Imagining yourself sitting at home, you can't work from home, you can't communicate with family, you can't order food, you can't basically do critical stuff like communicating with the doctor or letting them examine you or ordering the medicine home. Everything was, so we got this nice glimpse into how the future is going to be like, where we'll rely our entire lives on technology and internet connection, or whatever that might be a few years from now. And then you start thinking about where's this power of software coming from? And our thesis here is that the power of software comes from the exponentiality of software. What I mean by that is the ease of replication and scale of technology. So imagine you're building, an office building now. It'll look a lot like building a software. You build a foundation, you raise the funds, you bring the designer, you bring the architect. You notice it's also the same words. There's a software architect, you bring the architect, and then you bring the construction workers and the developers, and they build it, and then you test it, and then you certify it, and then it's ready for people, right, to use. And then people start using the building or the software. There's a lot of small bugs and fixes. You make them the first year, and then it's stable. Now, let's say you want to have another building just the same as this one. You got to pretty much start from scratch. And if you want to have this software serving double the people, you just deploy it again on another server. If you want it serving 1 million people, you just deploy it again and again and scale it. that gives software exponential power over the physical universe that we live in. And that what makes software, a lot of people look at software companies' valuation and they're like, why, how come this, startup company TripActions worth more than Marriott? And, Marriott has so many hotels, but the exponential power of TripActions, if it works the way it should and continues to grow the way it should, it's so much easier to scale it to millions and hundreds of millions of people, rather Marriott building 100,000 more hotels. So when you think about what is the single thing or the few things that may prevent software from being exponential, it's maintenance, performance, and security. So, the fact that you have a lot of buildings is great, but now you still need to protect all of them. That's not exponential. You still need to protect all those buildings. You still need to maintain. You have 1 million users, a lot more maintenance, a lot more support, a lot more bugs, a lot more scaling issues, a lot more security vulnerabilities and security issues. So that is at its core, going back to the data problem. The reason that data is so important in our future is if we enable smooth data analysis for isolating and solving issues faster, scaling and optimizing performance, protecting environments, protecting software, protecting the users, we enable software to be as exponential as it can be. That's where you generate that huge value to the world. You look at big companies in our space, you look at Splunk. Splunk is like, I don't want to talk about ourselves. Splunk is like a $25 billion company in our space. Leave the value that Splunk had created for their shareholders and, obviously the founders for a company that valuation. Think about the wealth that Splunk has created for the world in its 20 years of existence, enabling so much technology to be created and so many software products to be deployed and protected over the course of 20 years. And, when I think about that, when I think about our customers, some of them really leading companies, I think we have 10 customers in Fortune 100. We're a tiny company, but still, we're 100 people, but still, we're serving a massive amount of big companies, 1,500 paying accounts. That's already 1,500 companies that are using Coralogix to deploy faster, protect, and that's the collective value that we bring to the software world is much bigger than our own value. And that is where I see the solving the data challenge as something to really devote myself to.
This is beautiful. I've heard very few people explain things in such a thorough manner. I think, again, in our world, we don't think so much about infrastructure until it kind of hits us in the face or there's a hole in the wall. In my case, just wrote this up in my newsletter, we had a fire on our floor in our building. And, thank God we were okay. But again, you don't usually think about, hey, fire alarms or sprinklers or, hey, what is this building made of? Are there I-beams, right? Is it stable? Is this earthquake resistant, right? You don't think about these things until there's a hole burned in the wall or, something, there's a structural problem, God forbid, right? So I think it's very, very important just for people to understand that infrastructure has to, follow certain first principles. Yes, there has to be design, there has to be architecture, there have to be workers that build all of this stuff, right? It can't just sort of be at the end consumer stage and sort of say, okay, that's a lovely UI UX. That's awesome, beautiful, right? But what went into that long before there was any UI or UX to talk about? So I love how you formulated that.
It's what enables that. So you think about, let's say you want to, some people have disabilities and they can't go to schools. They have to learn remotely, okay? Forget COVID. What is it that enables them to learn remotely? Is it just the software of the learning software or the teacher recording the lesson? It is a big part of it. But if you take out the infrastructure, let's say the video lags or gets stuck, or when they ask a question, the chat doesn't work properly, or someone might break into their computer. And, you remember at the beginning of COVID, how many security issues were there in Zoom. And then, by the way, that's a great example because Zoom scaled. It was always there, but when it scaled and the entire world were using it, suddenly a lot of security vulnerabilities were figured because there are just more angles to attack. Because now there are like 1 million buildings to defend, not 100. But when you think of what will prevent me as a person who needs to, study from home, what will prevent me to adopt technology is the fear of getting hacked or, my information stolen. It's buggy software. It's software that lacks performance. That's where I use. And then whatever you create as software, whatever great ideas people have and visions people have, you can't really make that happen. You can't really bring that to the world. So the infrastructure and, cloud revolution is what Amazon had done, and obviously later on Azure and GCP. What cloud infrastructure had done is to bring the core or the basics infrastructure, the servers, the metal, to everyone. You think about a company like ourselves, okay? We're still a small company. There are like maybe 100 people in the office, okay? We have 1,200 servers. Now imagine it's all Amazon. Imagine I had to store 1,200 servers somewhere. You can't make it as a company. You can't even start. Because the very basic setup is like 100 servers. Do I come to an investor and say, hey, I need like $5 million to buy the equipment, and then I need a warehouse, and I need a security guard to guard it, and I need to build air conditioning systems to keep my servers cool. I mean, that just wouldn't work. So what cloud had done, the reason cloud is so successful, because many people ask themselves, what is so exciting about cloud computing? You just took my servers and you put it somewhere else, But the fact that it allows me to scale and not think about the layer of infrastructure, that's what promotes and creates innovation. So what we're trying to do is to make you not think about the data layer, not think about performance, not think about security. We'll monitor this for you. We'll visualize this for you. Not think about the cost, the massive cost it has. If you really wanted to do that, instead of the streaming analytics we do in real time without storage, if you wanted to store everything and run queries on this, if you don't think about that, you can start really innovating faster, delivering faster.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's obviously a lot more to say about this. I think we could go on for hours, but I think we won't. Maybe another time we can sit down and talk about 5G and what that means. We can we can talk about many other things related to infrastructure. But I want to pivot here a bit. One of the things that I think is most interesting. I mean, you mentioned infrastructure, right? So not every person is magically going to wake up and say, "Hey, yeah, I see through walls," right? No, maybe that's your superpower. Maybe not. What I want to get into just a little bit is, growing up, every person has some set of filters that they look at. For example, for me, it's always been language and psychology. But you know what? I'm from a Russian Jewish family, and we're all about math and science, and I have to go and do MD PhD and blah blah blah. You convince yourself, yeah, no, I'm a math and science guy, and it's very important. It's infrastructure, but it's not the primary filter for me. For me, that's language, psychology, history, whatever. So for you, I would love to just, you've obviously done a lot of work in not just visualizing the outside world, not just visualizing infrastructure, but for yourself. You've done a lot of that work as well. So is there something you can share for our listeners that perhaps they can use to visualize their own infrastructure, right? Because there's often that click moment where you say, like, I spoke with Omer Kilov a couple months ago, and for him, he had a terrible accident that he and his family went through. And he's going through after being in a startup, and he's like choosing from among 23 ideas. Number 18 is like this LiDAR thing that, may help save lives because it visualizes roads and environments and all that stuff, right? And maybe it's something that sounded interesting, but in the end it clicked. It's like, hey, you know what? That's actually a huge deal. So is there such a moment, or maybe, I don't know, you read Sherlock Holmes or Agatha Christie?
That's actually a very deep question, but the answer in my case is not complicated. You think about 3 years at 8,200 and the amount of times where you've seen with your own eyes how proper real-time robust, smart data analysis saves lives, prevents wars, prevents terror attacks, the ability to correlate data from different angles and make that data easy to digest to any analyst sitting on the desk, and how that can save lives, like literally hundreds of lives maybe. You can't underestimate the importance of the level of analysis that data can go through, and you're getting a really good school to where data analysis can get, because it's like 10 years ahead of where the world was when I released from the Army. And you go into this commercial company that's an asset company, very successful, and you're looking at the products and you're saying, wow, the world is like 10 years behind where it can be.
Yep.
And then I read this very interesting article about the guy who took over the Shabak, the internal intelligence unit for Israel, after the murder of the Israeli Prime Minister, Rabin. So, back then the Shabak was on the ground. There were a lot of terror attacks inside Israel. Prime Minister just got murdered. They were very low. And he got in, and he said that the first thing that he's done, he called all the managers of the departments and says, listen, let's have an open conversation. I know the situation is bad. I'm going to ask you questions. I'll accept any answer. But if anyone says, this is how we've always done it, he's done. And he started asking questions. And what he figured is that until then, talking 96, all intelligence records for the Shabak were written on paper. He asked, where's the information saying? He said, it's over there in the warehouse. It was shocked to see. And he's done a revolution that took 3 or 4 years. And in that revolution, they brought everything into basically databases and data warehouses and started creating synergies. And it took another 3 years, terrible 3 years for Israel, 99 to 2002. But by 2003 or 4, Israel was already capable of preventing about 95% of terror attacks. And by 2008, about 99.9% of terror attacks are prevented.
Yeah.
And this is, when you think about how a country looks like when everything sits, nothing's correlated, everything's on paper, every other day, terror attack, bus explodes, and then how it looks like, same enemies, even more advanced now, when everything's correlated and every phone call of a suspect, every move that he does, is, from the satellites to phone conversations to his chats, is correlated, and you can actually get to someone and wake him up in his bed and say, I know you're planning a terror attack tomorrow.
Yep.
You can't underestimate the importance of data when you see that day by day.
Thank you for that context. For me, living in Israel, I'm only here 6 months, and obviously I've been watching for a very long time what's going on here. I have family here. It's my people here. It's in a way very strange because I take the bus to Ulpan every morning, right? Just because that's what you do when you move to Israel. Got to go learn Hebrew. And I'm sitting in that bus, and once in a while my mind wanders, and I'm like, holy shit, you know what? About 20 years ago, I would have been really scared to get on this bus. And because of, maybe we touched the very tip of the iceberg here of what's going on. Maybe you watch Fauda, maybe you don't. There's so much incredible work, that's so many layers, so much innovation, so many, 18 to 21-year-olds that it's not just 8200, but that's maybe the most well-known, most prominent example of, essentially people that are very plastic. They're young, they're brilliant because they're selected, through a certain exam, et cetera, a certain selection process. They are thrown into this incredibly high stakes environment of literally life and death, right? And they have to figure things out very quickly, and they're all working around the clock to do this. And I can think of very few examples like that. I mean, around the world in any context. I can't think of the Pentagon doing this. I can't think of any other defense agency. Maybe some parts of NSA, CIA, they have some coders. But it's not like that. There's no corps d'esprit, right? There's not that special something that everybody goes through. It's just a professional army there. This is very unique, and there's a reason. Again, I'm not here to talk about Startup Nation. Other people have done this much better long before me. But there is that something that we, even just in these conversations on this podcast, we keep going back to, right? It's that people love to kind of take what they've learned from, their Play-Doh. They're young kids, get brilliant, and they're super curious. They're selected for that. Somebody oversees how their work is structured, how it's managed, but it's not overmanaged. So I'd love to pivot kind of the next part of our conversation.
There are a lot of startup incubators, but not many actually put you in front of life or death situations and pour insane budgets into 20 and 21 people's year-old people's hands, right? So, I mean, the amount of budget we had in our team when I was less than 20. I remember I remember one example that was like very, very strong with me, stayed very strong with me. There was this critical thing that we needed to install on computers. And if you misconfigured something tiny, it wouldn't work. And then you had to reinstall. And to reinstall, you had to go through the registry and delete one by one. It will take like 30, 40 minutes. And then the unit commander came to me and said, listen, you don't have time for this. We got to get this ready tonight. So I said, dude, I'm trying my best, but I'm installing, and then reinstalling takes half an hour. He takes me to a warehouse. He opens the door. There are like 1,000 boxes with computers. He says, don't spend your time on installing. If it doesn't work, just take a new computer and try it again. And I've wasted like 25 new computers until we got that image ready, and then we started rolling it. And that level of budget just doesn't exist anywhere. And they give you that. And, I remember counterparts, they were like from intelligence units outside Israel, they were like 50-year-olds, masters or doctors. They were like 19, 20. So that's a good experience that you get. And then you mentioned something very smart about making conclusions fast. And that is the key power of data analysis. Data provides a feedback loop, a quick feedback loop. Everything we do in life, we learn it faster and we become better the shorter the feedback loop is. The reason people learn how to, you ever thought about how amazing that is? You put a kid on a bike and you just push him and suddenly he knows how to ride a bike, right? It's kind of crazy, right? Because it's not that simple to balance yourself on a wheel and keep going and navigate yourself. It's like a 5-year-old. But what happens is that the feedback loop with bicycles is so short and tight. You move a tiny bit, it moves. You stop, it starts shaking. You move your body here, everything starts falling, you move back. So the feedback loop is so short, you fall 4 or 5 times, you already got the idea, you're done. And what happens with big decisions, what makes it so hard to improve, is that the feedback loop is very slow. You decide on a campaign, you start advertising or a rebrand, and a year after, you see the results. And now it's so hard to attribute something that you've done to the result. How can you really infer conclusions? But if the data is speaking to you real time, and the feedback loop's shorter, you start in that new campaign, and then 5 minutes after, you get an alert to your computer or mobile saying, we are seeing less sales in the last 5 minutes. Conversions rates are dropping. We're seeing anomaly in user behavior. Oh, wait, something that I've done. Let's roll back. Boom, it's back to normal. That's that feedback loop, and I can improve it now. Another campaign until I figure it out. So that's the most significant role of data, to shorten feedback loops for engineering, support, QA, BI, marketing, security teams. And then when you stop thinking about different problems as different domains, you gotta be a marketing expert, you gotta be a BI expert, you gotta be a security expert, and there are a lot of them today. And you start thinking about everything as a data platform. Everything is a data problem. And you're saying just bring the data, analyze it, and infer. It doesn't matter what the data is. I can see anomalies, after 7 years of looking at data and log data. I can see anomalies in whatever data you give me today. Give me like half an hour to analyze. And I can tell you, though, from my experience, there's zero difference between analyzing metrics and log data and security information and the other type of data that I was analyzing at 8200. It's exactly the same. And it's exactly the same skill set. And that is why it's so transferable. That's why you see so many people from 8200 working in the tech industries and succeeding. It's not like the tech industry in Israel is all homeland security, but it's just all a data problem. And that's why I like this, and this is why we chose that path. And now you got to figure, how do I scale this? Make it economic, make it easy to use, make it pluggable to other systems, make it that it's easy to send all that data from all the other systems and have all the different stakeholders working against the tools that they prefer or configuring the anomalies that they care about.
Okay, so clearly people are more complex, right? They're not just data points that are walking around. They're not just data generators either. So when you manage a company, clearly it's a very different scale of things, and there are many more moving pieces, not least because people are complicated and, life is complicated, and it's not just a COVID thing. It's just, that's how it is. So aside from, hiring people from 8200 that you already know, that are from your, directly from your class within the unit, not just people that went through the same system, not just people that see the world in a fundamentally similar way as infrastructure plus, et cetera. What have you found to be, again, we've had these conversations before, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you. What would you say are some of the most important kind of, loci that you look at within humans? So when you're interviewing or when you're, trying to solve bigger problems, something that you didn't think about, how do you approach people? What are some of the ways that you approach people management? Because that's a big thing for me.
Yeah. So there are some similarities and some things that are different between people and other, managed problems or managed challenges. First of all, we defined our strategy of hiring. We defined our, what's the code of conduct for a company. And we've done that by observing what worked for us. We've done that only after we had 20 employees. So me and my partner Yoni, we observed, who are the good ones? Is it necessarily the brightest ones? By the way, most of the company is not 8200 or 8100 or any of these.
Beautiful. I'm glad you mentioned that. That's important for context.
So we started looking at what is something that is common to everyone, and where did we miss? Where did we hire people that we thought were going to be brilliant, but they were not great for the company? They're probably great on their own. And we figured that in our company, and it's really independent per company, we have 3 core values that we need. And we say hungry, humble, and smart, but then we write in that order exactly. And we found that people that were hungry to learn and to succeed and were humble enough to understand that they need to learn and cooperate and know how to ask questions. In Hebrew, you say, "Lo ishan lamed." If you're shy, you can't learn. If they were humble enough and hungry enough to learn, even if they weren't brilliant, they were somewhat smart, they are very successful. And that's the first thing that we've created. And then did go back to short feedback loops. So a lot of the companies would go and say, we have evaluations every quarter, every half a year, every year. But that is exactly the long feedback loop. Even every week is a long feedback loop. And we've been employees. You know how it is when someone comes 6 months after your last conversations and it's like, I'm unhappy with 1, 2, 3, 4. You need to improve that. And
what have you done for me?
4, 5, 6, and it's great. Even if you do that once a week, it is very hard for me to really improve myself. And we are fanatic about constant feedback to employees on the spot. If you waited more than an hour to give someone feedback about something you're unhappy with, the odds of him really improving are very low. And I find myself many times walking into the office, I have a list on my phone, and I go desk by desk. I'm like, hey, good job on this. Or, hey, this is great, what you just brought to production, customers love it. Or, hey, this is not how we do business here, and you can't do this to a customer, or you can't do this to a partner. And then these people, first of all, understand that sometimes, it might sound like you're criticizing them too often, but in actuality, people love that because they understand that their job, their work is important to the organization. They understand that they understand that there's someone in the company always looks at their job, evaluates it, and it's there to help them improve. It's really important for people to understand these things because now they feel valuable. They feel like they're getting coached. Obviously, you do that on the right way. You present it as data. You present only facts. You don't present emotions or feelings, or I hate when you do that, because that doesn't matter. That's not a feedback loop. That's just insulting. Yeah. But you just present. You're saying, hey, in our company, we answer customers in under 1 minute on the chat support, and this is the data. And it took you 5 minutes. This is not how we do business. And that's factual. You can't argue with that. That's a feedback that I just gave you. If you do that again, I'll say it again and again and again until you are actually formed into our company culture, or you decide that it's not for you, which is perfectly fine. And I think we knock on wood and all the other superstitions, but we have the lowest churn rate of employees, I think, in the industry, because people are feeling constant improvement here, and people are never surprised by the feedback that they get. So that makes it so much easier for us as management, because there's never big conflicts. There are always small correction points, and this is how we also externalize our service. So what I mentioned about giving support in under 1 minute is that we have a live chat support on our website and inside the app where we answer our customers immediately. We also do the QBRs every quarter with them and customer calls. That's fine. But we get constant feedback, small, how water goes through stone, much easier than coming with a hammer. And then that culture is baked into the organization, but you got to have the right people. If they're not humble, if you come to someone who's arrogant and you give them feedback every day, they're just going to explode or quit or something. You got to be very humble to be able to say, I accept your feedback, I want to improve, I'm there. And if they're not hungry to improve, and everyone can improve dramatically, not as human beings objectively, but inside a company when you're trying to form yourself into the company culture. If you're not hungry, you're not going to do that work. You're just not going to do that self-work to get there. So when you hire the right people and you're coherent with your message, everyone are treated the same, you're treated the same, you're willing to walk the walk, and you're willing to show people that you'll give up superstars if they're not a cultural fit. Yep. You basically get a company that acts the same way, and it externalizes that same behavior to the customers and partners.
Just want to digest a few points, and then I want to wrap up because I want to be respectful of your time. I would say that, for me, as again, putting on my head of HR hat, coaching is a big deal. I think not many people are taught how to coach. It's just sort of like, hey, go manage people. Like, what's that, right? And a lot of people fail that because there's no instruction, there's no freedom of thought, there's no freedom of expression. Nobody asks, hey, who are you? What do you want from life? What do you want from this opportunity, right? So that's a very, very important layer where I would say actually it's a huge friction point. A lot of companies don't give managers training. They don't hire with any thought of like, okay, this is just a resource. It's a designer, it's an architect, it's a worker, whatever. Right? So the mechanistic nature of approaching the people management side, often something is off because of that view. So I think what you're describing is, first of all, you're hiring people that are open. It's almost like you have, two ends of two different neurons, right? And you have to make sure the signal passes. And the only way that can happen is if the receptors are open, right? So both things, this has to release a signal and this has to pick up the signal. And you have to facilitate that kind of, interneuronal place so things not only move well, but it has the right nutrients, it has the right things attaching and disattaching from those receptors. Sorry for going into neuroscience, but you got me going there. So I think it's a very, very important point that when you hire people, they have to already come with that. So, we're not going to discuss it today. Perhaps we can do that another time. But the idea of how do you measure hunger and humility? You can observe it, certainly, right? You can maybe ask certain questions in your interview. But, ultimately also people become less hungry and less humble because of their title and all of that. So we're not going to unpack all of that, but I just want to kind of put that out there that it's not some like magic formula or set of data points. There is some art to it. There's also a lot of emotional intelligence that you need to develop, as a founder, as a leader, as a manager. I think when you hire people like that and you give them that freedom to say, you know what, yeah, you have to be yourself. You have to believe that, we're here to help you, not just to build a great product, but to become better as humans and as professionals. Suddenly people say, you know what, I'm going to use more of my capabilities as a human as well. And that's when you see that iteration to the next round.
There's a set of questions we develop that we ask people to figure out some of these things, but also it's, again, goes to the feedback. Whenever we've made a mistake, and we have, and someone quits, or we need to let someone go, which is very rare. So, interesting fact, I personally never fired anyone in the company, ever. But when someone, just resign or something, we sit, me and my partner Yoni, and we actually make we call a post-mortem analysis. We talked about Army service. Yoni was an air traffic controller. So a lot of it is doing post analysis on every single flight. And he brought that mechanism on how to do that, which is brilliant. And then we analyzed, where did we go wrong? What questions did we ask in the interview? What were the signals? Did we get the right references? And then, at the first 10, it's a lot of art, like you mentioned. On the next 50, it's a bit of art, a bit of skill. But on the 100th employee, 30 minutes are typically enough to know if this our type or not. So that definitely makes sense.
That's cool. We all want to know now what's in that questionnaire. Okay, that's a separate question. Cool. I want to wrap up as we've spoken about, and as I've mentioned, with every other conversation on the podcast. The reason I started this is because of the book. The book has 4 conversations. One is about your body, right? So it's health, fitness, nutrition, etc. Other one is about mental models and life skills. The third one is dealing with other people, which we've talked about at length, which I really appreciate. Some really, really amazing insights you've given us. And then the last one is about, could be, you call it spirituality, God, universe, but something that is almost like a capstone. So for our listeners, you've been incredibly generous. You've given us some really interesting things to visualize, to think about, and even, I would say, implement. What would you share with us, just kind of in the last couple minutes, from any or all of those 4 areas that you apply in your own life?
I actually take the last one. So I had the privilege to, in my life, I've learned a lot of Talmud and Mishnah. And, at the beginning they were laughing every time I'd give an example from that. I always mentioned, like, every other architecture design review, I mentioned the Tzara Aruka and the Aruka Tzara, which is the short, long way and the long, short way. And in our meeting rooms, there's the 7 things that distinguish smart from not smart, and how you manage a discussion. So how you ask a question, how you answer a question, how you treat others. Do you barge into someone's things? Do you answer according to the order of questions that you were asked, and so on and so forth? So a lot of these things, I feel that helped me a lot. And you just mentioned about the neurons. One has to intercept and one has to. And what comes to my mind, the way that I describe it always, is that in Hebrew you say kli, like a tool. You have to be something that is ready to accept something. If you're not ready to accept something, then you just can't pour it in. If you're built, if you're full of holes that you can't accept oil. Everything will just pour. So you got to be there when you come to work with the company. You got to be there in your mindset, in your life, at a point where you want to improve and you're willing to listen, but you also at a point where you want to give, because we also learn from our team, and we also want to get feedback. So if you're not in that position, you're not a tool to accept and give what we can get or give you.
Yeah, it's all of these things are infused, but nobody talks about them, right? This is amazing, Ariel. Thank you so much. Such an amazing conversation.
Thank you
Such
very
a
much.
pleasure.
It's great to be here. As always, great chatting with you, man.
Wonderful. All the best, my friend. Take care. Maybe we'll do this again sometime.
Hopefully so. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Take care. Bye.
Bye.